Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small businesses and good stories in general. Welcome to episode 145 of Small Business War Stories. And today we continue our run after we spoke to Grace last week, a badass woman at Big Henry's. This week I talked to Erin O'Keefe, who is an amazing, multi-talented studio owner, music studio owner, music engineer, and also songwriter and all-around rock star Erin O'Keefe at Firefly Studios. And I originally met Erin because we're both part of a songwriter circle here in Austin where people write songs and swap songs and give each other feedback. And it's helped me a lot with my musicianship and sense of community. And Erin is really a very soulful artist, and also she has this really great business where she bought a house and built out an entire high-quality studio where she is working with a lot of great Austin artists. And we talk about what it means to, first of all, put together a studio. Second of all, be based on what we know, the only or one of the few female women studio owners here in Austin. So if there are others, please do reach out to us because Erin and I both want to meet you. I'll interview you, and Erin wants to collaborate. But it was a great interview where we talk a lot about what Erin is doing with the local music community. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Gusto, Gusto. They're a company that helps you with your payroll, with your invoices, with dealing with all the things that are frankly a pain to deal with. So as a small business, those are the things that you want somebody else to help you take care of those things. Does that make sense? We'll leave it in there. You know what I mean. If you need help with this, go sign up at Gusto, Gusto/War Stories. And that way they'll know that you found out about them through this podcast. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode, number 145, with Erin O'Keefe of Firefly Studios in Austin, Texas. And we are live here in beautiful Austin, Texas. And today I have the pleasure and honor to sit down with Erin O'Keefe, who is the owner, producer, engineer, overall badass here at Firefly Studios. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. I've known you for, it's been like a few years now, right?
Something like that, probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and like part of it, we're both part of a songwriter circle where we get together at different people's houses and swap songs and tell stories and learn about how to suck a little less at writing. And that's how I found out about this really badass operation that you have going on here, where you're saying we're not 100% sure about this, but you actually maybe through this podcast we'll find out. You as of from what we know now, you're the only female studio owner in the city of Austin.
I am the only one that I know of. Yeah. And I hope that is not actually the correct statistic.
I hope so too.
I hope that there are others. There are so many. There's so many little studios all over Austin and the surrounding area.
Yeah.
And I know there are I think there are some live sound engineers that are women around here, and I know of, I think there's a couple in Houston and Dallas and what have you. But as far as studio owners and engineers in Austin proper. Yeah, I don't know if I would love to know of some others.
Maybe we'll unearth some. On the performance side and on the design side and the graphic side, there's been more female involvement historically. Mm-hmm. But as you know, I had Karen Kelleher, who's a founder of Gold Rush Vinyl, vinyl manufacturing plant. Actually, she ended up pressing your record, right?
She did, yeah. Karen's great.
She's a badass. And she, her and I talked about this too, because on the manufacturing side, it's also, there are very few females.
Right.
So it's, it's
I
awesome.
can imagine.
It's cool to have all these pioneers in the show.
I know it's kind of silly to even think of it. I don't feel like any kind of
I think it's
pioneer.
true, right? I mean, it's awesome. I don't think it's silly. I think I mean, acknowledge that, honor that. That's awesome. Why'd you start doing this? Like, how did you? I mean, obviously you're a great musician, you're an amazing singer and songwriter, but how did you get into the more production, engineering side of it?
Well, thanks for that. So I've actually been involved or have dabbled in some sort of audio engineering long before I ever even wrote music or sang. So this sort of precedes my songwriting career. So when I was when it goes all the way back to high school, I did sound for our auditorium and for the musicals, and I ended up actually getting employed by the high school as part of a small group of kids that knew how to run things in there. And when the school would rent out the auditorium to local groups for whatever show or concert or whatever, they needed people to run it, and they had slave labor prices. With having high school students run it. So, and I loved it. I did that. So I learned how to run a Mackie board and kind of set stuff up. And
it's not that simple. I mean, I've looked at some, live boards, there's an art to it.
There's a lot to learn for sure.
Yeah.
But you can learn just a few basics. It's kind of not unlike songwriting, right? You can learn 3 chords and get pretty far.
Yeah.
but it takes a really long time to figure out how to be Jeff Beck or Joe Satriani, right? Like the scale is large and wide.
Sure.
And it's sort of the same thing with audio engineering. You can plug in a little H5 Zoom and 2 microphones, and without a whole lot of effort, have sound and figure out how to record. But then there's a scale that goes infinitely up with what else you can do within that realm.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess there's one side of it, which is the mechanical side. Like, how do you do things mechanically? Do X go to Y to Z? But then there's also the creative side, right? Like, how do you put together elements of a recording of studio to create something and a sound?
Right. Well, there wasn't, back in high school days, there was not a lot of creative element to it.
It's just mostly mechanical.
Just learning.
Okay, you started with the mechanical. That makes sense.
It was just learning. It was learning how to not get feedback, how to not, get mic rumble and ground hum and all those things. So I learned, I started learning audio engineering there. And then later on, fast forward 6-7 years, I found myself living in Savannah, Georgia, and then befriended a bunch of people there. And one of those people was my good buddy, Kevin Rose, who still owns a recording studio there, a small recording studio. And it so happened that he was renovating his studio when I was, just starting to kind of hang out with that crew.
Yeah.
And it needed some help, needed some hands, just helping to renovate and lay flooring and, wiring the walls and padding everything and whatever. So I went in, and it was sort of a great opportunity for me to really see exactly how a studio is constructed and what is in the walls and what is in the floors, and how do you deal with sound properties and elements within a room and within the construction of a room.
Yeah, it's not random because we're sitting in it right now, and there's as soon as I walked in, there's something special about the sound in here. I think what did I say? There's an odd combination of like sound absorption and sound reflection, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. And I love that you picked up on that, because that's exactly
I can just feel it the moment you walk in here.
Awesome. That's I recognize it too, but to have someone else recognize it is pretty sweet. But yeah, that's exactly how I designed this room. It's basically like a giant vocal booth, but I didn't want it to be a total vacuum. So absorption properties make it like dead, like you're standing in a vacuum. Like if you clap and there's no sound, you're in a total vacuum.
Yeah.
And when you're recording, you don't usually want something that is completely dead. You want it to sound like it exists somewhere in a space that is here on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the top portion of the walls in here with absorption panels, and the bottom parts of the walls I did with cedar planking, right? Because wood has a really great kind of resonant sound properties. So that's primarily what it is. And then we've got, like a drop cloud with lighting above us that has some absorption panels in it, but then there's the whole rest of the ceiling that is, drywall, textured drywall.
So this took quite a bit of work in terms of not just making this, which I want to hear about.
Yes.
But understanding what do you even do? Like, how do you even go about doing this?
Well, right. So I learned a lot in Kevin's studio in Savannah about what, how to handle a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
There is not really any guide for how to treat every room is completely different. The best that you can do is just learn the sort of basic principles of sound and guess. Guess how something is going to turn out.
That's like making guitars or like songwriting too, I guess.
Yeah, you can.
Except
you can
for
guess.
if you mess up a song, it's easier to change a chord than it is to change a wall panel.
than to change the construction of an entire studio. Yeah, and that was maybe the most terrifying part of this is like, you get years were in and tens of thousands of dollars of construction materials and labor in, and you don't really know if it's going to work until it's done.
Yeah.
So
wow.
So I'm pretty happy with it. I think it does what I need it to do, and we've made some pretty great recordings in here so far. But all thanks to Kevin for kind of showing me the way. And a lot of the even just visual design elements in here are kind of based on his little studio that I missed very dearly when I left Savannah. But yeah, I was a fly on the wall there, and I finagled some internship credit out of it, and kind of helped him run tracking sessions from time to time. And then, I have been financially independent for a very, very long time. And I ended up moving to New York after that, which, when I was right out of college with an English degree in 2008, there was not a lot of work. So that was
a bad time to get.
It was a bad time to try to go into publishing or journalism in New York City, right when the New York Times went bankrupt. But
right, and all the banks went under and everything.
Yeah, it was good times.
Yeah.
Good times. But the short of that was there was not a lot of music creation going on, not a lot of audio engineering or opportunities to do anything other than work and survive for the next 5 years. And then fast forward, I moved to Austin and take the job that I had with me in New York at the time, and that lasted about a year into my 10-year residency in Austin. Before I just couldn't stand it anymore and then had to be creating. So I pulled out of the day job, started some contract work later on, but I took the time to start a band and, the Succulents, that was my old band. And then, I was our engineer, when we eventually ended up recording a record. I took my little home rig with me. And I've also used the recording process as part of my songwriting process. So I like to hear how things sound structurally first and then kind of figure out how to arrange and put layers over that, myself. So I kind of want to hear what sort of direction it's going. So I use recording a lot.
And why Austin? Where else did you consider?
All roads led to Austin. I kind of chose to move here sight unseen because I knew enough about it. Mm-hmm. The job that I ended up getting in New York that I moved here with called for a lot of travel. And so I'd kind of been a lot of places across this country at least. And I'd sort of had a pretty good grasp on what this country was and where the different little pockets were and what the culture was in different places and what the pace of life was, just from kind of hopping around and being in every airport in the country.
Yeah.
So I really missed Savannah, but I knew that there was not a lot of economic opportunity there at that time. And I really wanted to be back down where it was warm and where there was a culture of creativity and making music. So, so kind of all roads led to Austin. You know, I knew there was like a couple other cities on the list, but for the most part, I was pretty set on Austin is what I wanted.
Goal, I mean, right now, this obviously you make some income from this and you love doing it. Mm-hmm. Is your goal to grow this so that this is your sole source of income? And what's your vision with having started this, or do you want to continue to have, because you have other stuff you do as well, right?
I do, and I'm kind of gonna just take it a day at a time. I mean, that would be great if everything changed, or if this grew enough to where it could be a full-time gig. Yeah, I wouldn't turn that down. But I also don't see the music industry at large changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I don't know that is a realistic thing to hang my hat on. But I'm not super upset about it either. I do, so half the year I do business technology consulting, the same line of work that I was doing in New York. But I just do it half the year, and then I do studio stuff kind of speckled throughout the year, but heavier from July to December.
Yeah.
And then that gives me an opportunity to tour with music and to kind of have some freedom to really pursue the music stuff a little bit more. But
so you're making your life fit you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not in our parents or the boomer generation model of you get a job when you're fresh out of college and then you work it for 50 years and retire.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. The average time at a job in my field is 3 years. So it's not really in the cards, and the music industry is completely turned on its head too.
Yeah.
So
what's your take on that? I've been talking to different folks, from people like Bruce Iglauer, who owns a blues label, which is a double whammy because it's a record label in an era where record labels are becoming less and less prominent, and in a niche genre like the blues. But then there's all kinds of other folks, like from musicians to maybe even like Carter Vintage guitars that sell instruments and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on like where the music industry is today and where it's going? I mean, with physical records.
That is
last week was actually Grace, who was the manager at Big Henry's Vinyl,
mm-hmm.
the vinyl store attached to Antone's. But we're talking about like how record sales are there's still a niche market for vinyl, but not they've gone down as a mainstream thing. So what's your take on all of it?
I mean, it's a hugely loaded question just by the virtue of how complicated and expansive the music industry is, and how many different little things and policies it touches.
Sure.
But yeah, it's much harder now for 98% of musicians to make a living at it and to make money at it than it was, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with, streaming services becoming in, satellite radio and whatever else, becoming more prominent and paying less.
Yeah.
I think the average consumer is paying less than they were back in those days for music annually. And it's ultimately felt at the artist level. And it's also, I think, less of that money is coming down the corporate chain and making it into artists' mouths. Like,
right. But there is a way to do it. So I'm not gonna give away his name, but one of my neighbors is in a nationally touring band, and he mm-hmm. tells me that they do make enough money from streaming, and especially with placing music into things like TV shows and movies. So there are ways to make it work.
With sync licensing and all that, yeah.
Yeah, but there's this weird thing where it's like it's more democratized because more people can make music, but it's also harder to stand out because there's a lot of noise to signal ratio. So
yeah, there is. I think the physical media sales are a lot less, and from the perspective of someone who's in recording and who likes to make records, it's a much tougher spot than I would have been in 30 years ago if I was starting my career then or hitting my peak. But it's just, I think vinyl is ever so slowly kind of coming back, and people are still buying it. But you're right, it is still like a very niche specialty market. It's not like everyone goes out and buys a vinyl record like they used to in the 70s when a record came out, so there's less money to go around. I think, as as capitalism progresses and wealth disparity increases, there's less money in general in the market, and entertainment is one of the things that takes a hit first. So music kind of suffers in that way too. But I don't know. I think there's also been, along with that, there's been just a cultural shift in thinking and in terms of just the perceived value of what music is and what you're willing to pay for it. Everyone wants it for free now. And I think because it's been made free, it's been available, and if we go back to how a lot of the streaming companies and on-demand services are paying out and what their business model is, they're relying on mechanical licensing rates from the 90s that were set by the government that are still the rates, where it's a fraction of a cent per play. And, basically the rates were set when streaming wasn't anything. It was not a competitive edge. And now that it is, a significant chunk, if not the majority of how people digest music now, it's those rates are not adequate anymore yet. Yet all these tech startups have built their business model around that and are used to those paying out those prices. So like, there's this whole perceived notion of, well, this is what it has been, so this is what it should be. Yeah. And I should get it for free now. Right.
So what I'm hearing is, so first of all, it's in flux, so we have no idea what it's going to be like 10 years from now. But in order to run a small business that's music-centric like yours, there has to be like a huge love of the game component, right?
It's like an entirely a love of the game component. Yeah, you work kind of just to keep the lights on in the place, and you find a way to keep going. Yeah.
But again, and going back to what you were saying, that we're not our parents' generation, that today it's possible to, people have more flexibility as to what they do. So maybe it is possible for you to like make money in another way with a quote unquote day job, and then also have a music studio that is, that pays the bills.
Yeah. And it's really not the worst scenario. Like I don't hate the other work that I do. Right. It's challenging. It's interesting. It can be really stressful at times. I really love that I only do it half the year. It's much easier to do.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is? Or
we can. It's probably less interesting to people who are tuning in to listen to about a studio. But yeah, that makes sense. But it's technology work, and it's trying to figure out what businesses need, and how you can build technology to accommodate that or to accomplish the task at hand.
And that allows you to have enough to do this and be able to pursue the things that you love.
Yeah, being strategic about it, keeping low overhead, has been tantamount to finding a way to keep going. Yeah. So I to date have not needed to go down any kind of VC routes or or bring any other companies or people into the game. I've been able to be self-sustaining with getting the studio going and kind of keeping the lights on here. And just sort of juggling everything else, but it's not the absolute worst thing. I think a lot of people, especially in music, when you talk about a day job, it's like, oh, you got a day job, huh? And it's like,
the
it's
percentage
really not
of
terrible.
people who can afford to have like a good living without having a day job in music is not that high, right? Like it's tough to make a living only with music.
Correct.
Unless. There are people who are working musicians who play a ton of gigs. unless you're spending 150 days on the road every year, it's not easy.
It's super not easy. And I'm glad that you mentioned, the spending 180 days on the road, or, some people spend 300 days a year on the road.
Yeah.
And that's how they make their money. And there's this common perception that I kind of scoff at, or I don't like. I don't know how true it is or not, but that you, if you're going to be a musician, if you're going to make music and be a songwriter, that the only avenue to make money, or the only avenue of that has a monetary value, is merch and live shows.
Okay.
Right?
Tell me more.
Well, so I like records, man. I like to make records.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, a million years ago, when I was a kid, I liked to listen to records. I like to get lost in them. I like to be transported to this other world. Yeah. And to me, the record was the product. The record was the thing of value.
Yeah.
And if that band went on the road and I had a chance to see them, great, because then I had a chance to experience, something similar to what was on that record, and maybe a different format, and maybe in a different environment.
Right.
But to me, the record was the masterpiece. And that I think is what has kind of culturally shifted. Now there seems to be this understanding that you make a record almost as an advertisement, so you can go make money on the road.
Right.
And that's
what
seems
other
really
ways
backwards
are
to
I
me.
mean, so records are a way to make money. We talked about placing music into shows and movies is more of a thing now than it was 20 years ago, simply because there are more shows and movies and things like that being made with streaming services and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity. What other ways are there for people to make money in the music world, to make kind of bring things together?
Oh man, you're asking the wrong person.
Well, you have a pretty good visibility. I mean, you're a songwriter, you're a touring artist, you have a studio, you make records.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, making money at all those things is kind of
a different story.
It's a different story, because there's definitely expenses and overhead, and you just try to keep it as low as possible. But yeah, I mean, there are ways. I think a lot of people do take the touring angle to go make money. I just don't. I'm not denying that is the truth or isn't the truth. I just sort of wish that it wasn't the large perception that that records aren't important anymore.
Yeah.
Like someone releases a record and they do it so they can go on tour and have a reason to go on tour. But it was always the other way around for me, and I still operate
Like
the other way around.
In its own. Yeah.
Yeah, I make a record first, and that's the product for me.
Interesting. Now, when we started the podcast by talking about how neither you nor I are aware of other female studio owners, which hopefully this podcast will help unearth some in Austin and certainly around the country that can connect with you. Mm-hmm. What are some of the good things about that, and some of the challenges with that? I mean, it's an intrinsic part of who you are, obviously.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's been more of an asset for me, just because I'm sort of siloed in. I'm a sole proprietor, and I kind of run things by myself. But I have sat in other studios and done tracking sessions, and I've done a lot of tracking sessions here. And for the most part, I get feedback that people tend to, that I'm, I guess, less curt than some of my male counterparts, and that I'm a little easier to work with. Maybe there's a little softer edge. Maybe I'm, a little more tapped into the empath side of being a producer and working in a studio.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've known a lot of male producers who are brilliant at that. And I've tried to learn as much as I can from them, and what works and what doesn't. So I don't know if that has to do with me being female or me just being a more perceptive learner as far as the human element of production, which is not to say I've been perfect always, but I try to learn from my own mistakes too.
Sure. We all do.
But it is super heartwarming and encouraging when I get feedback from musicians, and I think most of them have been male, who have said, I really liked working with you. I felt more comfortable. Awesome. Which is, yay, that's the goal. That is the goal, because recording can be really stressful and most people get really nervous.
Yeah,
a lot of people get nervous
yeah.
coming into record. And even if you're just doing a small thing, people who feel really comfortable on a stage will get super nervous once they're in front of a microphone in the studio.
Well, it's a different art. So I've spent a lot of time on stages, and I have an EP out, but being on a stage, a lot of the skill is the performance, and you make a mistake, you just keep going, right? Like the more time you spend on stages, the less you care about your mistakes, which is a good thing because most of the time nobody else notices them.
Right.
In a studio recording, that is different because every little mistake is on there.
It's true, but
right?
you can always retract stuff, and you can, that's not part of what a studio is. You don't come in here and sing a song for 4 minutes and leave and go home. Like, that's not how it works.
Right.
And if you're out there and you're thinking about paying for some studio time and you think you're going to knock your thing out in 4 to 10 minutes, you are mistaken.
Yeah. So on average, how long I guess it depends on how many parts are there to the song.
Yeah, it totally depends. It depends on if some people just come in here to track like a demo and they just want to put like a vocal over top of a track that they've already built somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that can be pretty quick. But if you come in here looking to do a record or to do, drums, bass, guitar, keys, vocals, whatever, and you got full arrangements and production and all of that, that's a significant amount of time that it takes to get that right and to figure out exactly what you need.
And you probably learn a lot along the way, like you're getting better at it.
Well, you're right. Everybody learns a lot along the way. But it's hopefully for folks with small budgets, which every musician I know has a small budget, and you want to keep it as tight as you can. The way to do that is to do as much work before you ever set foot in the studio as you possibly can.
What does that mean? Practicing a lot?
Everything. That means everything. That means coming up with arrangements. No writing in the studio. That's a huge one for me. No writing in the studio. Like if you have a small budget and you want to get this done, writing in the studio is an incredible luxury. And I don't just mean writing the song and lyrics and the structure of the song. I'm talking about arrangements. I'm talking about where the guitar goes and exactly the notes the guitar is playing, and how you want this to sound and what the direction is and all that. A lot of those decisions will be made. Kind of the final feel will be made by the producer. But if you don't know what the guitar part is going to be, like I've had folks come in here before, and the guitarist comes in. Well, I could do it this way, and I could do it this way, and I could do it this way, and it's like, well, okay.
Which way?
What you're telling me is we're going to take 4 hours to figure out what it is that you want to do.
Right.
But we have budgeted 1 hour to get this tracked. So, plus the time to make those decisions and the time to do that. Like if you want to record all of those and then have me do that or have a producer do that, like that's time after tracking that still has to be accounted for. So people don't realize exactly how much work has to go into it.
So there's an education process.
There's a huge education process, especially with folks who haven't recorded before.
Do you have
pretty
any
green on the process.
Resources that maybe, I feel like you should have a YouTube channel or a podcast where you talk. I mean, seriously, where you like just sit here and do like 5-minute YouTube videos about like these things.
That's a good idea. I should do that.
Because and then you can put them up on your site, and you can use it as a way to spread your message out there
to help educate. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I like to just sit down with somebody before we engage in a project, or just kind of set some guidelines if we're doing a larger project of what needs to happen. But it is tough if you've never gone through this process before. People still don't seem to grasp exactly how much preparation needs to go into and how prepared you need to be to walk into the studio to really knock stuff out. Yeah, because it will take.
I thought I knew, but now I'm listening to you. I'm like, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, you probably don't know. Most people don't know. Unless if you've made 3 or 4 records, then you know.
No, I only made one, and I made a lot of the mistakes that you're mentioning right now. So.
most first time.
All the songs were written, but there were definitely a lot of like new approaches and ideas that came up during the sessions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, and there will be.
But we did not spend 1 hour on anything. So
there will be a little bit of that, but I mean, the way to keep the costs down and to keep the hour figure down is to go and record it on your crappy rig at home, and hear how it sounds. If you're doing live tracking, track with the band, and if everybody can play the song through exactly how you want it, and exactly the final arrangements 5 times in a row, without mistakes, then you're ready.
Holy shit, that's a high barrier.
And if you can't, then you're either not ready or live tracking is probably not the way that you want to go. And a lot of people say they want to live track because to save time, right?
Oh, not because of the feel.
Well, right. They think they can get the same feel out of live tracking that they can with isolated tracking, and it's not quite the same.
What do you prefer?
But I always prefer isolated tracking, but
really?
I think it's a taste thing. It's a preference thing.
That means that everybody records their thing separately with earphones.
Yeah, you might. I mean, you could do a scratch track that's live, with like the drums and the singer and what have you, and then keep some things from that. But if you're going to do live tracking, there's going to inevitably be in a room like this. So this is a 20 by 20 foot room. We have some gobos, some moving panels that we can kind of try to isolate a little bit. Yeah. But for the most part, if you're doing live tracking with drums or anything loud in here, there's going to be mic bleed of everything into everything. Yeah. And the more mic bleed there is, the less options you have in mixing and in final production. So I always like to do isolated as much as I can. You get some of that live feel from laying down a scratch track, and then everyone plays to it, when they do their track over top of it. But I like to have as much free reign over mixing as I possibly can.
Because in the long run, it probably ends up you end up spending less time because you don't have to redo everything if there's a problem.
Well, right. That's the other thing with live tracking is if the drummer plays perfect and the singer is perfect and the guitar player is perfect, but the bass player screws up a note, there's no way to fix that note. I mean,
have you had a situation where something went really wrong here?
Not really. I mean, knock on wood. Yeah. We haven't really yet. Okay. Where something's gone crazy wrong. At least not as far as tracking goes. I've had a couple moments of panic prior to sessions where, gear is not cooperating at the last minute.
Oh yeah, what happened?
Well, I mean, it's technology, man. There's a lot of stuff. So, I use Universal Audio and I have a Mac. So sometimes an OS update doesn't play nice with your recording software. And sometimes you don't find that out until the last minute.
That sounds glorious.
It's awesome. Yeah. Or sometimes you hook up a microphone, then all of a sudden there's a hum or some noise that's coming from somewhere. And, so this is like why this is a, lesson for me that I've learned in the past. You got to set up a couple hours ahead of time to find all that stuff.
Make sure that
make sure
everything ready to go.
Because if you do encounter one of those problems, you have a pretty good sense of your gear after you've used it enough, but there's potentially, 20 different points of potential failure where that hum could be coming from. It could be coming from a crossed cable somewhere. It could be coming from, the mic itself. It could be coming from something in the room, something outside. It could, you know what I mean? It could be a software problem. It could be a lot of different things.
Troubleshooting that sounds like a lot of fun.
It's not the most fun thing about recording.
Cool.
But
sounds like you had really, you've learned a lot and you know what you want to do with it. So what is your vision 5 years from now? Where do you want to be with this?
I want to have more records done.
Yeah.
In 5 years.
All
That's
right.
it. More records.
More records.
Sounds
good.
I want to have a way to keep making them. That's really it.
That's awesome. That should be your slogan on your website. More records.
More records.
Love it. Where can people find you? So for your studio and for your own art, where can people find you? What are your websites and social handles and such?
Okay, well, the studio website is fireflyaustinstudio.com. There is also a Facebook page that you can find by I think if you just get on Facebook and search Firefly Austin Studio, it should come up. Just created a Twitter account, so that it exists now too. I'm still getting going on all the accoutrements, the social accoutrements.
It's kind of exhausting.
It's super exhausting. I honestly haven't promoted the studio that much. I haven't had.
Have you had people fly in from out of town as well, or is mostly people here in Austin?
No, it's all been local so far, and I'm stretched in a lot of different ways, and I have a lot of different irons in the fire, but. So I haven't, gone super headstrong into creating more studio business. I usually have to turn down business at this point.
Ooh,
so
there you go. I'm going to have to get
time.
my name on the list. Where can people find your music, the stuff that you do?
Music. There's it's O'Keefe-music.com is the website. So OKEEFE, just one F.
Yeah.
-music.com. And then I've got all most of the stuff. There's a Facebook and an Instagram account that are at O'Keefe is me, and then there is a Twitter account that is at EC O'Keefe. So the letter E, the letter C, and then OKEEFE on Twitter, and then if you want to find me personally, you can probably find me at Sam's Town Point.
Sam's Town Point, awesome South Austin bar. Erin, thank you so much.
Yes,
and
my brother.
Congratulations on your continued success.
Thank you so much.
And I look forward to
thanks for
staying
taking
in
the
touch.
time.
Of course, thank you. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.